Panic and terror gripped everyone in the Foundation facility. Well, everyone who was still alive, that is. Guards were working tirelessly to fight back and regain control of the building, but they didn't have enough bullets to suppress the oncoming horde. Somehow, a sample of SCP-008 that was being examined for testing purposes had managed to spread to one of the research staff. Before long, the very same researcher was now a mindless zombie, a reanimated corpse that had managed to bite several other staff members, spreading the infection. It didn't matter that this original carrier was shot down by security personnel. It had already done its damage and passed on SCP-008. By now, there were too many of them to simply bonk each one on the head and neutralize it. The Foundation facility had gone into full-scale lockdown, an emergency quarantine to try and limit the spread of the deadly virus. Any exit to the outside world was shut and would stay sealed tight until someone from the Foundation could do something. But that meant the few surviving members of staff trapped inside were at the mercy of the zombie horde. Their options were limited. SCP-500 was known to perfectly cure those infected with SCP-008, but with all exits locked, it was impossible to get any of the remaining SCP-500 pills on site. Then one of the surviving researchers, one Dr. Omel, had an idea. It was an insanely risky plan, one that the Foundation would never sign off on, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Gathering up the remaining security forces that hadn't been infected with SCP-008, along with a research assistant that had managed to escape the zombies, Dr. Omel and his band of survivors headed deeper into the facility. While the external doors were all locked to prevent the SCP-008 infectees from making it out and spreading the virus to the wider world, the doors inside the facility were all still functioning, and it was a good thing too. Dr. Omel's plan relied on opening the doors to two anomalies: SCP-914 the Clockworks, a machine capable of destroying or refining anything placed inside of it, and SCP-049, the Plague Doctor. It was a shot in the dark at best. Omel had observed the Plague Doctor for some time, and knew that the beak-faced surgeon was capable of creating zombie-like creatures known as SCP-049-2, not dissimilar from the zombies infected with SCP-008. If anyone could potentially fix this nightmare, there were few as well versed in anomalous medicine as SCP-049. Taking him to the Clockworks was, however, an even bigger risk. Normally, SCP-049 killed any he touched, and turned their deceased bodies into SCP-049-2s, hence Dr. Omel calling for a refinement of the Plague Doctor's abilities. Placing him in the input booth of SCP-914 and setting it to very fine, Omel prayed he'd made the right call. He could hear the horde of SCP-008 pounding outside the locked door. What emerged from the Clockworks was still recognizable as SCP-049, retaining his beaked mask, although the mask itself was actually flesh and bone, a part of his skull. His robes now flowed out behind him as a pair of dark, feathery wings, giving him an even more bird-like appearance. Despite this, SCP-049 had claimed that he'd never been a bird before. "I'll admit, I didn't expect wings," the surviving assistant remarked. "That's not so surprising, really," Dr. Omel admitted. "He did lay an egg that one time."
He did what?
Before an explanation could be given, the SCP-008 zombies managed to break down the door and came flooding into the room. Omel recoiled in horror as they snarled and shuffled closer, reaching towards him with decrepit fingers. Suddenly, SCP-049 swooped into the path of the encroaching undead with a flap of his new wings. Calmly, he gave a gentle move of his hand, like lifting something from a shelf. A bizarre contraption appeared around his forearm, a gauntlet connected to syringes that were strapped to each of his fingers, all filled with various different fluids. Dr. Omel was amazed. SCP-049 seemed to now have the anomalous ability to summon surgical equipment from a tiny pocket dimension. It was almost exactly like how SCP-076-2 Abel drew his weapons. Reaching towards the nearest SCP-008 zombie, still moving with the utmost calm, SCP-049 stated, "Now try to hold still." He spoke in a gentle voice, with the bedside manner most medical doctors would be incapable of. This might sting a little. With that, SCP-049 pushed the syringes into the zombie, the fluids draining from each one, then refilling as he withdrew his hand. The SCP-008 instance froze for a moment, almost like it was confused before it began to emit what looked to be steam, as though it had stepped out of a hot shower, shaking uncontrollably. The necrosis and telltale signs of infection seemed to disappear, like being washed away until all that was left of the SCP-008 zombie was the infected researcher it had been before. The man was alive and well, much to Dr. O'Mell's astonishment. SCP-049 hadn't just cured the SCP-008 infection, he'd actually reversed it, leaving the infectee alive and well. It took a few hours for SCP-049 to fly around the facility on his new wings, effortlessly turning all the SCP-008 zombies back into their old selves one by one. By the time he was done, everyone on site that had previously been exposed to SCP-008 was cured, and it didn't stop there. The Foundation still mandated everyone who was previously infected to remain in quarantine whilst they were examined, demanding the now refined SCP-049 to remain in his cell, which he politely complied with. When the SCP Foundation doctors took a look at the formerly zombified staff, they were amazed at what they found. Each one had all traces of SCP-008 completely removed from their systems. Trying to re-expose them to the virus, their bodies now seemed to be able to generate anomalous antibodies that rejected and fought off infection by SCP-008 in a matter of seconds. The Plague Doctor had made everyone immune. Upon further testing, examining skin and blood cells from the former infectees, and performing full top-to-bottom health checks, the Foundation doctors learned something else, too. Everyone that SCP-049 had cured was even healthier than they had been before. One security guard had been a one-pack-a-day smoker for 10 years, but an X-ray revealed any damage to his lungs, mouth, and throat had all been completely reversed. On every possible internal and external level, the formerly zombified personnel had all been returned to pristine health by SCP-049. Eager to witness the full extent of these new anomalous abilities the Clockworks had given him, the SCP Foundation struck a deal with SCP-049. If he performed a mission for them, then they would provide him with the means to have anything he wanted. For a moment, the Plague Doctor pondered their terms, and then agreed. "What is it you want in return?" Dr. O'Mell had asked. "To cure the world, Doctor," SCP-049 replied simply. The Plague Doctor flew as fast as his wings would carry him to the location the Foundation had given him. It was an isolated region in Siberia, kept completely cut off from the rest of the world by guards working around the clock. Arriving at the edge of the frozen town, SCP-049 was approached by the security commander and given his full directive from the Foundation. "Your objective, I'm told, is simple. You enter the restricted area and neutralize anything you come into contact with. When you're done, return here, and we'll report the results to command." "Thank you, Commander." The Plague Doctor nodded graciously. "You have been most helpful." He didn't ask what was out there, merely turned and began walking through the snow until he could no longer be seen by the eye. Maybe he had already sensed what was out there, what kind of sickness plagued this place, and understood exactly what the Foundation were asking him to do. If SCP-049 had any questions, he did not make them known. Instead, he just headed off in search of every instance of SCP-610 he could find. There was quiet for an uncomfortably long while. The personnel standing guard at the edge of the area watched through the snowfall, ready if anything started slithering its way towards them. The Foundation's security all tensed when the motion sensor picked up movement, accompanied by the sounds of fighting and the bizarre inhuman noises from instances of SCP-610. Then, after another long period of unsettling quiet, somebody spotted a gently glowing light making its way through the snow. As it drew closer, the glow of a burning makeshift torch made it clear that the figure holding it was SCP-049. And as he made his way towards the rendezvous point, it quickly became apparent he wasn't alone. Shivering in the freezing cold and wet from the snow, covered in scraps of dirty clothing and whatever else they could find, was a huddled mass of people. All of them looked bewildered, following the light of SCP-049's torch like a guiding beacon towards the edge of the perimeter. The Foundation security all stood slack-jawed in amazement at what happened. while the Plague Doctor led the people and urged the commander that they all needed warmer clothing immediately. He had done it. SCP-049 had cured the flesh that hates. In the coming months, the Foundation soon found themselves very busy. Everyone who had previously been infected by SCP-610 needed to be screened and examined, just to make absolutely sure there was no chance they could mutate into a fleshy monstrosity again. But just like before with the former SCP-008 zombies, these people were in perfect condition, cured and healthier than they had ever been. By using his new anomalous surgical skill and healing power, SCP-049 had returned the flesh that hates victims back into human beings. It was starting to seem like there was no disease, no infection, anomalous or otherwise, that he could not cure. The Foundation began an effort to rehouse the former SCP-610 infectees. Given that most of them had spent years as aggressive, anomalous abominations, almost every one of them had officially been pronounced dead and couldn't just go back to their old lives. The SCP Foundation gradually reintroduced them into the world, setting up new identities and integrating them into new countries. SCP-049 even personally helped console some of those that struggled with the adjustment, offering to give them therapy to aid in the process. He was more than just a plague doctor, it seemed, thanks to the Clockworks. SCP-049's good work didn't stop with curing the flesh that hates either. As promised, the Foundation allowed him to carry out his newfound purpose. Whereas before he was obsessed with eradicating what he called the Pestilence, now the Plague Doctor seemed to be directing all of his focus to curing the world, as he put it. And he started with some of his fellow anomalies. The Plague Doctor started experimenting with his new tools, concocting cures and serums aplenty, by pulling whatever he needed from an endless supply of equipment and ingredients at his fingertips. He developed a cure for the condition that caused Daniel McIntyre to become SCP-2800 Cactus Man. His skin reverted back to normal, no longer sporting spines, while the plant-like parts of his DNA once again became human. SCP-049 even offered a sympathetic ear to a lot of Daniel's troubles, giving him therapy through a lot of his mental health difficulties. SCP-2102 was also one of SCP-049's successful patients. His condition of rapidly overproducing new skin tissue when injured quickly became a thing of the past. Then the Plague Doctor turned his sights to the wider world, working tirelessly to create new vaccinations and treatments for diseases that were once thought to be incurable. Everything he made and had the Foundation distribute to those that needed it was all 100% effective. People were healthier and happier than ever, all thanks to the Plague Doctor. Until they weren't. In attempting to eradicate disease the world over, a new strain of illness emerged. SCP-049 took to calling it a new pestilence, and it was nothing short of horrific. It would have been considered anomalous at one time, but it quickly became so widespread that it couldn't be contained. All the Plague Doctor's advanced medical treatments had encouraged this disease to mutate, to adapt against everything he could throw at it. It could infect any person at any time and present itself with virtually any symptoms. It resisted drugs, any form of treatment, and it spread rapidly. Eventually, while trying to come up with a way to protect people from this strain of superbacteria, this new pestilence, SCP-049 started to fall ill. He had caught it, and even with his refinement, he was beginning to weaken. The Plague Doctor was dying, and once he was gone, the whole world would soon follow. As more and more people caught the sickness, there was only one thing he could do, a way to leave someone behind to carry on his work. When the Foundation, those that weren't yet ill, found SCP-049, he had already passed. But alongside his body was something smooth and pearlescent, an egg, and inside, maybe a chance for the world to be cured. Want an anomaly of your own? Check out scpswag.com for high-quality SCP merch. Now go check out What If the Flesh That Hates was put inside SCP-914 and SCP-049 Boiled, Scrambled, and Fried Plague Doctor Tale for more pestilent entertainment.